The morning sun cast long shadows through the towering windows of the Riverside County Courthouse, its golden rays illuminating the polished marble floors, where countless stories of justice had unfolded. Among the bustling crowd of lawyers, defendants, and families, 3-year-old Emma Rodriguez sat perfectly still on a wooden bench that seemed to swallow her tiny frame. Her small legs dangled several inches from the floor, her patent leather shoes occasionally swinging back and forth in an absent rhythm that spoke of nervous energy contained within a child who had learned to be silent. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's grandmother, adjusted her black shawl and glanced down at her granddaughter with eyes that held months of accumulated worry. The lines around Maria's face had deepened considerably since that terrible night 6 months ago when everything changed. She reached over to smooth Emma's dark curls, which had been carefully braided that morning with small white ribbons. Maria's attempt to make this courthouse appearance feel less frightening for the little girl who had already endured far too much. "Mia," Maria whispered softly in Spanish, her weathered hand gently squeezing Emma's small one. "Remember what the nice doctor said. You don't have to be afraid here. Abuela is with you." Emma's large brown eyes, once bright with the innocent joy typical of a 3-year-old, now held a depth that seemed unnatural for someone so young. She stared ahead at the courthouse activity with an expression that was both vacant and intensely focused, as if she were seeing something invisible to everyone else. Her silence had become her shield, protecting her from a world that had suddenly become dangerous and unpredictable. The preliminary hearing for People vs. Unknown Driver in the hit-and-run case of Sofia Rodriguez was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh had warned Maria that without Emma's testimony, their chances of ever finding justice were slim to none. The physical evidence was limited, and Emma remained their only witness to the crime that had left Sofia fighting for her life in a hospital bed. Dr. Sarah Chun, the child trauma specialist who had been working with Emma for months, approached the bench with careful, measured steps. She had seen too many children like Emma victims of circumstances beyond their control, their voices stolen by trauma that adults could barely comprehend. Despite months of patient therapy, Emma had remained largely nonverbal, communicating only through nods, head shakes, and the occasional whispered yes or no to her grandmother. "Good morning, Emma," Dr. Chun said softly, crouching down to the child's eye level. "I know today feels scary, but remember what we practiced? You're very brave, and you don't have to do anything you don't want to do." Emma's eyes flickered toward Dr. Chun for just a moment before returning to their fixed stare at the courthouse entrance. The child had developed an uncanny ability to appear present while simultaneously seeming miles away, a coping mechanism that had become her default response to the overwhelming world around her. The courthouse buzzer echoed through the marble halls, signaling that proceedings were about to begin. Lawyers shuffled papers, family members whispered prayers, and the general chaos of the legal system continued its relentless pace. In the midst of this orchestrated confusion, Emma remained an island of stillness, her small hands folded neatly in her lap, her breathing steady and controlled. It was at precisely 9:47 a.m. when Officer Jake Thompson pushed through the heavy courthouse doors, his uniform crisp and his presence commanding immediate respect. Beside him walked Rex, a magnificent German shepherd whose black and tan coat gleamed under the courthouse lights. Rex was no ordinary dog. He was a highly trained canine officer with the Riverside Police Department, specializing in drug detection and crowd control. His presence in the courthouse was routine. He and Officer Thompson regularly provided security during high-profile cases. The moment Emma's eyes fell upon Rex, something extraordinary happened. Her entire body language shifted as if an electric current had suddenly coursed through her small frame. Her back straightened, her eyes widened, and for the first time in months, She displayed a reaction that went beyond her carefully constructed emotional walls. Rex, despite his intimidating size and official capacity, possessed an intuitive gentleness around children that had made him legendary within the department. His ears perked up as he sensed Emma's intense focus, and he turned his intelligent eyes toward the little girl with what almost seemed like recognition. Emma's right arm slowly rose, her tiny finger extending to point directly at Rex. The gesture was deliberate, purposeful, and filled with an urgency that caught everyone's attention. Dr. Chun immediately noticed the change in Emma's demeanor, her professional instincts recognizing that something significant was about to unfold. The courthouse seemed to pause in that moment, as if the very building held its breath. Lawyers stopped their conversations mid-sentence. Court clerks looked up from their paperwork, and even the usually distracted security guards turned their attention toward the small bench where Emma sat. Then, breaking 6 months of near-complete silence, Emma's voice cut through the courthouse air with crystal clarity. 2 words, spoken with the conviction of someone much older than her 3 years, echoed off the marble walls. Bad doggy. The impact was immediate and profound. Maria Rodriguez gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth as tears instantly sprang to her eyes. Dr. Chun felt her heart skip a beat, recognizing that this unexpected vocalization might be the breakthrough they had all been desperately hoping. FOR. Officer Thompson, trained to notice even the smallest details, immediately stopped walking and began to assess the situation with professional curiosity. But it was Emma's expression that truly captured everyone's attention. Gone was the vacant stare, the protective emotional distance she had maintained for months. In its place was something raw and immediate connection to a memory that had been locked away in the trauma-protected recesses of her young mind. Her finger remained pointed at Rex, unwavering, as if she were identifying something of critical importance. The courthouse fell into an unprecedented silence, broken only by the soft clicking of heels on marble and the distant hum of fluorescent lights. In that moment, everyone present sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. The first real breakthrough in a case that had consumed the Rodriguez family and frustrated investigators for half a year. Emma's words hung in the air, like a revelation waiting to be understood, and as Officer Thompson began to move slowly toward the bench where she sat, it became clear that those 2 simple words, bad doggy, were about to change everything. 6 months earlier, February 14th had started as the most ordinary of days in the Rodriguez household on Magnolia Street. The morning sun filtered through the cheerful yellow curtains of their small 2-bedroom apartment, casting warm patterns across the hardwood floors that Sofia Rodriguez had spent hours polishing the weekend before. Emma sat at the kitchen table in her favorite pink pajamas, her chubby toddler hands wrapped around a sippy cup filled with chocolate milk, chattering away in the delightful mixture of English and Spanish that had become her signature way of communicating with the world. "Mommy, doggy outside," Emma had announced excitedly, pressing her nose against the window as she spotted Mrs. Chun's golden retriever being walked past their building. At 3 years old, Emma's fascination with dogs bordered on obsession. Every canine encounter was met with squeals of delight and an immediate desire to pet the furry stranger. Sophia smiled as she packed Emma's favorite snacks into a small backpack. At 26, she worked double shifts at the local diner to support herself and Emma. But Tuesday evenings were sacred, their special time together to walk to Martinez Market for groceries and ice cream. It was a tradition they had started when Emma first learned to walk, a simple routine that had become the highlight of both their weeks. "See, Mia, maybe we'll see more doggies on our walk," Sophia had replied in her musical voice, the same voice that sang Emma to sleep every night, with lullabies her own mother had sung to her decades earlier. She braided Emma's dark hair into 2 neat pigtails, securing them with small elastic bands decorated with tiny butterflies. The weather that evening was perfect for their walk. 65 degrees with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of jasmine. From the community garden down the street, Sophia helped Emma into her little pink jacket and her favorite light-up sneakers that blinked with every step. As they stepped onto Magnolia Street, Emma immediately began her usual routine of pointing out everything that caught her attention. Red cars, barking dogs, colorful flowers, and the elderly man who always sat on his porch waving at passers-by. "Careful, baby," Sophia said automatically, taking Emma's small hand in hers as they approached the intersection at Magnolia and 4th Street. It was a crossing they had made hundreds of times before, a route so familiar that Sophia could have navigated. It blindfolded. The crosswalk light was green, and the evening foot traffic was light. Just a few neighbors returning home from work, and some teenagers gathered outside the corner pizza shop. What Sophia couldn't have known was that 3 blocks away, Marcus Wheeler was stumbling out of Murphy's Tavern after consuming 6 beers and 3 shots of whiskey over the course of 2 hours. His vision was blurred, his reflexes dangerously impaired, and his judgment had abandoned him completely. Behind the wheel of his red Ford F-150 pickup truck, Wheeler had already committed multiple traffic violations in the past 10 minutes, running a stop sign, weaving between lanes, and driving nearly 15 miles per hour over the speed limit. Through a residential neighborhood. In the passenger seat of Wheeler's truck sat Titan, his 3-year-old German Shepherd, panting heavily with his massive head hanging out the open window. Titan was Wheeler's constant companion, accompanying him to work sites, bars, and everywhere else Wheeler went. The dog's presence in the truck would prove to be a crucial detail that no one could have anticipated at the time. As Sophia and Emma stepped into the crosswalk, Emma suddenly stopped to retrieve a small pink hair ribbon that had fallen from her pocket. Sophia paused patiently, watching as her daughter carefully picked up the ribbon and examined it, with the intense concentration that only a 3-year-old could muster for such a simple object. "Mommy, pretty," Emma declared, holding up the ribbon. For Sophia's approval. It was at that exact moment that Wheeler's truck came screaming around the corner of 4th Street, the engine roaring as Wheeler pressed the accelerator instead of the brake, his alcohol-impaired brain unable to process the scene unfolding in front of him. The truck was traveling at nearly 40 miles per hour in a 25-mile-per-hour zone, and Wheeler's reaction time was virtually non-existent. Sophia's maternal instincts kicked in with lightning speed. She saw the red truck bearing down on them, without a moment's hesitation, pushed Emma with all her strength toward the opposite curb. The force of Sophia's protective shove sent Emma tumbling onto the sidewalk, just as the truck's front bumper collided with Sophia's body with the sound of crushing metal and shattering bone. The impact launched Sophia 30 feet through the air, her body striking a parked Honda Civic before landing on the asphalt with a sickening thud. Wheeler's truck continued for another 50 yards before crashing into a fire hydrant, sending a geyser of water high into the evening sky. The sound of the collision echoed through the neighborhood like a bomb exploding, bringing residents running from their homes and apartments. Emma, scraped and dazed but miraculously unhurt, crawled on her hands and knees toward her mother's motionless form. Sophia lay crumpled on the street, blood pooling beneath her head, her breathing shallow and labored. Her eyes were closed, and she didn't respond when Emma began patting her face with tiny, desperate hands. "Mommy, wake up! Mommy, wake up!" Emma cried, her voice becoming increasingly frantic as she tried to rouse her unconscious mother. She shook Sophia's shoulders with the gentle persistence of a child who didn't understand the gravity of what had just occurred. Wheeler, meanwhile, had climbed out of his damaged truck and was swaying unsteadily on his feet, Titan whining anxiously beside him. For a moment, Wheeler stared at the scene of devastation he had created. The injured woman, the crying child, a gathering crowd of horrified onlookers. His alcohol-soaked brain struggled to process the reality of what he had done. Instead of stopping to help or calling for assistance, Wheeler made a decision that would haunt him for months to come. He whistled for Titan, climbed back into his damaged but still functional truck, and drove away from the scene, leaving behind a trail of radiator fluid and the shattered remains of two innocent lives. Mrs. Patterson, an elderly neighbor who had witnessed the entire incident from her front window, was the first to reach Emma and Sophia. She found Emma covered in her mother's blood, still trying to wake Sophia up while tears streamed down her small face. Mrs. Patterson immediately called 911 while wrapping Emma in her own sweater, shielding the child from seeing the full extent of her mother's injuries. The paramedics arrived within 7 minutes, but those 7 minutes felt like hours to Emma, who refused to leave her mother's side. As Sophia was loaded onto a stretcher and into the ambulance, Emma's last clear words for months were spoken to the paramedic who tried to separate them. "I want my mommy." By the time they reached Riverside General Hospital, Sophia had slipped into a coma from which doctors weren't certain she would ever emerge. Emma, physically uninjured but emotionally shattered, was released into her grandmother's care that same night. The little girl who had chattered constantly about everything she saw would speak fewer than 50 words over the next 6 months, retreating into a silence that protected her from memories too painful for a 3-year-old mind to process. Officer Jake Thompson had been working with K-9 units for 12 years, but he had never experienced a moment quite like this one. As Emma's clear voice echoed through the courthouse with those 2 startling words, "Bad doggy," Thompson's trained instincts immediately kicked into high gear. He had learned to read situations quickly and accurately, and everything about this little girl's reaction told him that something significant was happening. Rex, sensing the sudden shift in atmospheric tension, remained perfectly still beside his partner. The German shepherd's ears were alert, his intelligent brown eyes focused intently on Emma, as if he too understood that this moment was different from their routine courthouse security rounds. Rex had been specifically selected for his work, not just because of his exceptional training in drug detection and crowd control, but because of his remarkable ability to remain calm and gentle around children and trauma victims. Thompson slowly approached the bench where Emma sat with her grandmother, his movements deliberate and non-threatening. He had worked enough cases involving child witnesses to understand that any sudden motion could potentially re-traumatize a young victim. As he drew closer, he noticed that Emma's entire body language had transformed from the withdrawn posture she had maintained since entering the courthouse. "It's okay, sweetheart," Thompson said softly, his voice carrying the warm, reassuring tone he had perfected through years of community policing. "This is Rex, and he's a very good dog. He helps us keep everyone safe here in the courthouse." Emma's response was immediate and startling. Instead of the fear or withdrawal that Thompson might have expected, she leaned forward on the bench, her small body tense with what appeared to be recognition rather than terror. Her pointing finger remained fixed on Rex, but her eyes held an intensity that seemed far beyond her 3 years. "Bad doggy car," Emma suddenly added, her voice gaining strength and clarity with each word. The addition of car sent an electric shock through Dr. Sarah Chun, who had been observing this interaction with growing fascination and professional concern. Dr. Chun had spent months working with Emma, employing every therapeutic technique in her considerable arsenal to help the traumatized child process and communicate about the night of the accident. Play therapy, art therapy, music therapy, even experimental treatments involving emotional support animals, nothing had successfully unlocked Emma's memories or encouraged her to speak about what she had witnessed. Yet here, in this unexpected moment with a police dog, Emma was voluntarily offering new words and seemingly trying to communicate something specific. Emma, honey, Dr. Chun said, moving closer to the bench with careful steps. Can you tell us more about the bad doggy? And the car? Emma's gaze flickered between Rex and Dr. Chun, and for the first time in months, her face showed active engagement rather than the passive compliance she had displayed during their therapy sessions. She began making gestures with her free hand pointing toward the courthouse entrance, then at Rex, then making a steering motion as if driving a car. Doggy, go fast, Emma said, her small voice carrying an urgency that made everyone in the immediate vicinity stop what they were doing to listen. Doggy and car go fast like mommy fall down. The revelation hit Dr. Chun like a physical blow. Emma wasn't just making random associations. She was connecting Rex to a specific memory from the night of the hit and run. The child was telling them that she had seen a dog in the car that struck her mother. This was the breakthrough they had all been desperately hoping for, but it was coming in a way that none of them could have anticipated. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's grandmother, felt her legs go weak as she understood what her granddaughter was trying to communicate. For months, she had prayed for Emma to speak about that terrible night, to give the police some clue that might lead to finding the person who had destroyed their family and left Sophia fighting for her life. Now Emma was not just speaking, she was providing what could be crucial evidence. Officer Thompson immediately understood the potential significance of Emma's words. As a veteran investigator, he knew that eyewitness testimony from a 3-year-old would face significant legal challenges. But if Emma had indeed seen a dog in the hit-and-run vehicle, it could provide investigators with a specific detail to pursue. German Shepherds were not uncommon, but they weren't so prevalent that this detail couldn't help narrow down potential suspects. Rex, stay, Thompson commanded gently, and the well-trained dog immediately sat, remaining perfectly motionless as Emma continued to study him with intense concentration. Dr. Chun recognized that she was witnessing a profound therapeutic breakthrough, but she also understood the delicate nature of the situation. Emma's sudden willingness to communicate could be fragile, and pushing too hard or too fast could cause the child to retreat back into protective silence. At the same time, the potential investigative value of what Emma was revealing meant that every word needed to be carefully documented and preserved. Emma, you're being very brave, Dr. Chun said softly. The doggy in the car, was he big like Rex? Emma nodded vigorously, her pigtails bouncing with the motion. Big doggy. Brown and black like him, she said, pointing again at Rex. But bad doggy. Bad doggy hurt mommy. The specificity of Emma's description sent a chill down Thompson's spine. She wasn't just saying she saw a dog. She was providing detailed identifying characteristics. A large German Shepherd, brown and black in coloring, in the vehicle that struck her mother. This was potential evidence that could transform the investigation. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, who had been preparing for what she expected to be a routine and likely disappointing preliminary hearing, heard the commotion and hurried over to the bench. As Dr. Chun quickly briefed her on what Emma was revealing, Walsh felt her pulse quicken with the possibility that their impossible case might suddenly have new life. We need to document this properly, Walsh said quietly to Dr. Chun and Thompson. But we also need to be extremely careful about how we proceed. Emma's well-being has to be our top priority. Emma, meanwhile, seemed to be gaining confidence with each passing moment. The presence of Rex appeared to be acting as some kind of catalyst, allowing her to access memories that had been locked away by trauma. She began making additional gestures, pointing at various parts of Rex's body, and then making corresponding motions to indicate what she remembered about the dog in the car. Doggy head out window, Emma said, leaning forward and sticking her own head forward in demonstration. Doggy mouth open like this, she added, opening her mouth wide in imitation of a panting. Dog. Dr. Chun felt her heart racing as she realized the implications of Emma's increasingly detailed recollections. The child wasn't just remembering that. There was a dog in the car. She was remembering specific details about the dog's behavior and positioning within the vehicle. These were the kinds of precise observations that could prove invaluable to investigators. Thompson was already mentally composing the report he would need to file with Detective Santos, the lead investigator on the Rodriguez case. A German shepherd. In the passenger seat of the hit-and-run vehicle, head hanging out the window, mouth open as if panting. Combined with Emma's earlier mention of a red car, they now had a much more specific profile to work with. "Emma," Thompson said gently, "you've been very helpful. Rex and I are going to help find the bad doggy and make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Emma's response surprised everyone. Instead of fear or uncertainty, she looked directly at Officer Thompson with an expression of determination that seemed to belong to someone much older. "Good," she said firmly. "Find bad doggy. Help Mommy." In that moment, the traumatized little girl who had been silent for months revealed the strength and courage that would ultimately help solve her mother's case and bring justice to their family. The following morning, Dr. Sarah Chun arrived at her office 2 hours earlier than usual, her mind racing with possibilities. Emma's breakthrough at the courthouse had kept her awake most of the night, replaying every word, every gesture, every moment of the child's remarkable emergence from months of traumatic silence. She had immediately rescheduled her entire day to accommodate an emergency therapy session with Emma, knowing that this window of communication might be fleeting and precious. Her office, normally a sanctuary of soft lighting and carefully chosen therapeutic toys, had been transformed overnight into something resembling a detective's investigation room. Chan had spent hours gathering materials that might help Emma articulate her memories. Toy cars in various colors, stuffed animals of different breeds and sizes, art supplies, and even photographs of different dog breeds that she had printed from the internet. She understood that she was walking a delicate line between therapeutic intervention and evidence collection, but the potential breakthrough was too important to handle carelessly. Officer Thompson arrived at 9:30 a.m. sharp, Rex padding quietly beside him through the office corridors. The German shepherd had been specially groomed that morning, his coat brushed to perfection, his demeanor calm and professional. Thompson had briefed Rex extensively about their unusual assignment. While the dog couldn't understand the complexities of the legal case, he could sense the importance of remaining gentle and patient with the small human who had reacted so strongly to his presence. "Are you sure about this approach?" Thompson asked Dr. Chun as they prepared the room. "I've never used Rex in a therapeutic setting before. What if it backfires and traumatizes her further?" Dr. Chun adjusted the placement of a small red toy car on the coffee table, her movements precise and deliberate. "In traditional therapy, we would never introduce a potential trigger so directly," she admitted. But Emma's response yesterday wasn't typical trauma behavior. She wasn't displaying fear or avoidance. She was showing recognition and a desire to communicate. Rex isn't just any dog to her. He's somehow become a bridge to memories she's been unable to access. When Maria Rodriguez arrived with Emma at 10 a.m., the change in the little girl was immediately apparent to everyone in the room. Gone was the withdrawn, passive child who had sat silently through countless previous therapy sessions. Emma's eyes were bright and alert, her posture straight and engaged. She spotted Rex immediately and walked directly toward him without hesitation, her small hand extended in greeting. "Hi, doggy," Emma said clearly, her voice carrying none of the tentative whisper that had characterized her speech for months. "You came to see me." Rex, following Thompson's subtle hand signals, remained perfectly still as Emma approached, allowing her to pet his head and examine his face with the intense curiosity of a child who was seeing something familiar yet significant. Dr. Chun observed every interaction carefully, taking detailed notes while remaining ready to intervene if Emma showed any signs of distress. "Emma," Dr. Chun said gently, "would you like to play a game with some toys while Rex watches? You can tell us more about the doggy you saw that night." Emma nodded enthusiastically and immediately gravitated toward the collection of toy cars arranged on the coffee table. Her small fingers moved through them systematically until she found a red pickup truck, which she held up triumphantly. "This one," Emma announced with absolute certainty. "Bad doggy was in this car." Dr. Chun felt her pulse quicken as she reached for her notebook. "Emma, can you show us where the doggy was in the car?" Without hesitation, Emma placed one of the stuffed German shepherds in the passenger seat of the toy truck, positioning it so that the dog's head hung out the window opening. The precision of her placement was remarkable. This wasn't the random play of a 3-year-old, but the careful reconstruction of a specific memory. "Doggy here," Emma said, adjusting the stuffed animal's position. "Head out like this," she demonstrated, by sticking her own head out to the side. Tongue out, panting fast like he was hot. Thompson leaned forward, fascinated despite his professional composure. "Emma, was the doggy making any sounds?" "Woof, woof," Emma replied, making barking. Sounds that she modulated to mimic what she remembered. Loud woofs when car went fast. Doggy seemed scared too. The detail was extraordinary. Emma wasn't just recalling that there was a dog in the car. She was remembering the animal's emotional state, its physical positioning, even the sounds it was making during the collision and immediate aftermath. Dr. Chun realized they were witnessing something unprecedented in her experience with child trauma cases. "Emma, sweetie, can you remember anything about the person driving the car?" Dr. Chun asked carefully, not wanting to push too hard, but recognizing the investigative importance of the question. Emma's face scrunched up in concentration, her small hands still manipulating the toy car and stuffed dog. "Big man," she said after a long moment, "smelled funny. Like Daddy's medicine bottles." Maria Rodriguez gasped softly from her chair in the corner. Emma's father had struggled with alcoholism before abandoning the family when Emma was just 18 months old. The child's association of the driver's smell with Daddy's medicine bottles, what Emma had called the beer bottles her father constantly carried, was a chilling indication that the hit-and-run driver had been intoxicated. The big man was sleepy driving, Emma continued, using her hands to demonstrate wobbly, unsteady steering motions with the toy car. Car went like this. She zigzagged the truck across the coffee table, not straight like Mommy teaches me cars should go. Thompson exchanged a meaningful look with Dr. Chun. Emma was describing erratic driving behavior consistent with severe intoxication weaving, inability to maintain lane position, impaired reaction time. Her 3-year-old vocabulary couldn't articulate concepts like drunk driving, but her description of sleepy driving and the car going not straight painted a clear picture of an impaired driver. "Emma, this is very important," Dr. Chun said, leaning forward slightly. "Do you remember anything about the numbers on the car? Sometimes cars have numbers and letters on them." Emma's face lit up with sudden excitement. "Yes, numbers like me." She held up 3 tiny fingers. 3 like me. 3 was on the car. The revelation sent a jolt through both adults. Emma was recalling specific details from the license plate, the number 3, which corresponded to her own age. This wasn't just a random association. It was a concrete detail that could significantly narrow down the search parameters for investigators. "Where was the 3, Emma? Can you show us on the toy car?" Thompson asked, his voice carefully controlled despite his mounting excitement. Emma examined the toy truck carefully, then pointed to the rear bumper area. 3 was here, with other numbers and letters, but 3 was the one I knew, because I'm 3 too. She continued playing with the toys, unconsciously recreating the sequence of events she had witnessed. The red truck approached the intersection, the German Shepherd's head hanging out the passenger window, the erratic movement indicating the driver's impaired state. Then came the moment of impact, which Emma demonstrated by having the truck knock over a small figurine representing her mother. "Car hit Mommy and kept going fast," Emma said, her voice becoming quieter but maintaining its clarity. Doggy was still barking when they went away. I think Doggy was sad too because he knew it was bad. Dr. Chun felt tears threatening to overflow as she watched Emma process these traumatic memories through play, finding a way to externalize the experience that had been trapped inside her for months. The child's empathy even extending to the egg. Dog in the perpetrator's vehicle demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence and resilience. Officer Thompson was already mentally cataloging every detail Emma had provided. Red pickup truck, large German Shepherd in passenger seat, intoxicated male driver, license plate containing the number 3, erratic driving behavior, and the approximate time and location of the incident. Combined with the physical evidence from the scene and any available surveillance footage, these details could provide investigators with a solid foundation for identifying the suspect. As the session continued, Emma's confidence grew exponentially. She began volunteering additional details without prompting the sound of the impact. The way the truck's engine sounded rough and damaged after the collision, even her memory of trying to wake her unconscious mother while the perpetrator's vehicle disappeared into the night. "We're going to find this bad doggy and the person who was driving, Emma," Thompson promised, his voice filled with conviction. "You've been incredibly brave and helpful." Emma looked up at him with eyes that held wisdom far beyond her years. "Will you tell the bad doggy's owner that he needs to say sorry to Mommy? Maybe he didn't know his doggy was in a bad car." The innocence of her question, her assumption that the dog was as much a victim as her family, revealed the pure heart of a child who had somehow maintained her compassion despite experiencing unimaginable trauma. As Dr. Chun concluded the session and prepared to share Emma's revelations with the investigation team, she knew they had just witnessed something extraordinary, a little girl's courage, transforming a cold case into a solvable crime. Detective Maria Santos had been staring at the Rodriguez case file for so long that the words had begun to blur together on the pages. 6 months of dead ends, false leads, and frustrated witnesses had left her feeling like she was chasing shadows. The hit-and-run investigation that had once consumed her every waking moment had gradually been relegated to her cold case drawer, a place where unsolved crimes went to gather dust and haunt the dreams of detectives who couldn't let go. But Officer Thompson's urgent phone call at 2:47 p.m. on Thursday afternoon changed everything. As he relayed Emma's detailed revelations from the therapy session, Santos felt the familiar electric surge of adrenaline that every investigator experiences when a breakthrough finally materializes. She grabbed a fresh legal pad and began scribbling notes frantically, her handwriting becoming increasingly illegible as the significance of Emma's testimony became clear. A red pickup truck with a German Shepherd in the passenger seat, license plate containing the number 3, and an intoxicated driver, Santos repeated into the phone, her voice rising with excitement. "Jake, this is exactly what we needed. This little girl just gave us our suspect profile." Within 30 minutes, Santos had assembled a task force in Conference Room B at the Riverside Police Department. The room, normally used for routine briefings and budget meetings, had been transformed into a command center with whiteboards covered in timeline charts, evidence photos, and now Emma's detailed recollections transcribed in neat block letters. Detective Carlos Mendez from the Traffic Division joined the team, bringing with him databases of vehicle registrations and DMV records that would prove crucial to their search. "Let's start with the basics," Santos announced to the assembled team of 4 detectives and 2 data analysts. We're looking for red pickup trucks registered in Riverside County and surrounding areas. Cross-reference that with German Shepherd ownership records from veterinary clinics, dog licenses, and animal control databases. The search parameters seemed almost impossibly specific, yet Santos knew that in criminal investigations, specificity was often the key to success. Emma's remarkable memory had provided them with a combination of identifying factors that should significantly narrow their pool of potential suspects. Data analyst Rebecca Chong began inputting search parameters into the California DMV database system, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she filtered through thousands of vehicle registrations. Detective Santos, I'm showing approximately 2,847 red pickup trucks registered in Riverside County alone. That's before we factor in surrounding counties where the perpetrator might live. Now cross-reference with dog ownership, Santos instructed, pacing behind Chong's desk as the computer systems processed the complex search. Look for German Shepherds specifically. Check veterinary records, county licensing databases, and any pet insurance registrations we can access. The first database cross-reference yielded 127 potential matches red pickup truck owners who also had registered German Shepherds. It was still a substantial list, but manageable for a systematic investigation. Santos felt her pulse quicken as she realized they were closer to identifying their suspect than they had been in 6 months of traditional detective work. Detective Mendez approached the whiteboard, where crime scene photos were displayed alongside a map of the accident location. Maria, I've been thinking about Emma's description of the license plate. She specifically remembered the number 3 because it matched her age. If we assume the 3 was in a prominent position, first digit, last digit, or repeated, we can narrow this down even further. Brilliant, Santos replied, turning to Chong. Rebecca, can you filter our 127 matches by license plates containing the number 3 in prominent positions? As Chong refined the search parameters, Santos reviewed the physical evidence they had collected from the crash site. Paint transfer samples, glass fragments from a damaged headlight, and tire impression patterns had all been preserved. But without a suspect vehicle to compare them against, the evidence had been largely useless. Now, with a specific list of potential suspects, every piece of physical evidence could become a crucial piece of the puzzle. Got it, Chong announced, her voice cutting through the focused silence of the conference room. Filtering by prominent 3s in license plates brings us down to 31 potential matches. That's a manageable list for field investigation. Santos studied the printout, her experienced eyes scanning through names, addresses, and vehicle descriptions. One entry immediately caught her attention. Marcus Wheeler, 34 years old, residing at 1247 Oak Street in Riverside. His red 2018 Ford F-150 had the license plate 3RDK847, and according to county records, he was the registered owner of a 3-year-old German Shepherd named Titan. This one, Santos said, pointing to Wheeler's information. The license plate starts with 3, and look at the timing his dog. Registration date corresponds with a puppy that would be the right age to be hanging its head out truck windows. Detective Mendez began pulling additional background information on Wheeler through the police database system. What he discovered made the entire team lean forward with interest. Wheeler had 2 previous DUI arrests, both involving his red pickup truck. The first was 3 years earlier, and the second was just 8 months before the Rodriguez hit-and-run incident. Pattern behavior, Santos muttered, studying Wheeler's criminal history. 2 DUIs in 3 years, both involving the same vehicle. Emma's description of sleepy driving and the smell like Daddy's medicine bottles fits perfectly with an intoxicated driver. The investigation team decided to conduct surveillance on Wheeler before approaching him directly. Santos knew that if Wheeler was indeed their perpetrator, any premature contact could give him time to dispose of evidence or flee. Instead, they would observe his routines, document his vehicle's condition, and gather as much preliminary evidence as possible before making their move. Detective Sarah Kim from the surveillance unit was assigned to conduct visual observation of Wheeler's residence and workplace. Her initial report, filed just 4 hours later, contained information that sent chills through the entire investigation team. Wheeler's red pickup truck showed signs of recent bodywork, fresh paint on the front bumper area, and a recently replaced headlight assembly on the driver's side. "He's been making repairs," Kim reported during an emergency briefing at 6 p.m. "The bodywork is professional quality, but it's clearly recent." I also observed a large German shepherd matching Emma's description in the backyard of his residence. Santos felt the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place with satisfying precision. Wheeler's attempt to repair damage to his vehicle actually provided additional evidence of his guilt. Professional body shops were required to document all major repairs, and the timing of Wheeler's bodywork could be cross-referenced with the date of the Rodriguez incident. "We need a search warrant," Santos announced to the team. "I want to examine that truck with a fine-tooth comb. Paint transfers, glass fragments, impact damage patterns. If Wheeler hits Sofia Rodriguez, his vehicle will tell us everything we need to know." Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh joined the meeting to discuss the legal aspects of obtaining a search warrant based on a 3-year-old's testimony. While Emma's revelations were compelling, Walsh knew that building a prosecutable case would require substantial physical evidence to support the child's eyewitness account. "Emma's testimony is remarkable, but we need the physical evidence to be ironclad," Walsh explained to the assembled team. "A defense attorney will attack every aspect of a toddler's memory and reliability. We need the truck, the paint transfers, the timeline, and preferably some additional corroborating evidence." Santos nodded in understanding. "What about surveillance? Footage from the night of the incident? We checked nearby businesses 6 months ago, but now that we have a specific vehicle and time frame, we might be able to enhance existing footage." The team immediately began contacting businesses along Wheeler's most likely route from Murphy's Tavern to the accident scene. Traffic cameras, security systems from retail stores, and even doorbell cameras from residential properties were requested and reviewed with renewed focus. The breakthrough came at 9:23 p.m. when Chang discovered footage from a gas station 3 blocks from the accident site. The timestamp showed 7:41 p.m. on February 14th, just 12 minutes before the collision. The grainy black and white footage clearly showed a red pickup truck with a large dog visible in the passenger seat, pulling away from the gas pumps. "License plate enhancement," Santos ordered immediately. "If we can make out even part of that plate number, we'll have Wheeler dead to rights." As the investigation team worked through the night, processing evidence and preparing warrant applications, Santos couldn't help but marvel at the remarkable turn their cold case had taken. A traumatized 3-year-old's courage to speak about her memories had transformed an unsolvable mystery into a targeted manhunt with a specific suspect in mounting evidence. Wheeler had no idea that his carefully concealed crime was about to be exposed by the very witness he thought was too young to remember or articulate what she had seen that terrible night. The search warrant was executed at 6:47 a.m. on Friday morning, catching Marcus Wheeler in his underwear and flip-flops as he stumbled toward his front door. Detective Santos had assembled a team of forensic specialists, crime scene technicians, and uniformed officers for what she knew would be the most crucial evidence collection of her career. Wheeler's bleary eyes and alcohol-tainted breath confirmed what Emma's testimony had suggested. This was a man whose relationship with liquor had destroyed not just his own life, but had shattered an innocent family 6 months earlier. "Marcus Wheeler, you're under arrest for suspicion of vehicular manslaughter and hit and run," Santos announced as Officer Rodriguez secured handcuffs around Wheeler's wrists. "You have the right to remain silent, ... Wheeler's initial reaction was telling. Instead of confusion or outrage that might characterize an innocent person being wrongfully arrested, Wheeler's face went ashen gray, and his hands began trembling violently. He kept glancing toward his red pickup truck, parked in the driveway, as if seeing it through the eyes of investigators for the first time since that terrible night in February. "I want a lawyer," Wheeler mumbled, his voice barely audible, over the sound of Titan barking furiously from the backyard. The German Shepherd's agitated behavior drew immediate attention from the forensic team. This was the same dog that Emma had identified as being in the passenger seat during the hit and run. Forensic specialist Jennifer Park began her examination of Wheeler's truck with meticulous precision. 6 months had passed since the collision, but she knew that modern forensic science could detect evidence that would be invisible to the naked eye. Her portable spectrometer would analyze paint transfers at the molecular level, while high-powered magnifying equipment could reveal microscopic glass fragments embedded in the truck's bodywork. "Detective Santos," Park called out after just 20 minutes of examination, her voice carrying barely contained excitement. "You need to see this." Santos approached the truck where Park was focused on the front bumper area. Under specialized lighting, previously invisible damage patterns became clearly apparent. Despite Wheeler's attempt to repair and repaint the bumper, the impact zone showed telltale deformation, consistent with striking a human body at high speed. The bodywork was professional, but they couldn't eliminate all traces of the original damage, Park explained, photographing the evidence methodically. "See these stress fractures in the metal? They're consistent with impact patterns from pedestrian collisions. And look here," she pointed to a small section near the license plate mounting. "Blood traces that weren't completely cleaned away." The discovery sent a surge of vindication through Santos. Emma's testimony was being corroborated by hard physical evidence that could withstand any legal challenge. But Park wasn't finished with her revelations. "There's more," Park continued, moving to the passenger side of the truck. Hair fibers embedded in the window-sealed German Shepherd fur, consistent with a large dog regularly riding with its head out the window. "And detective, you're going to love this." Park directed Santos's attention to the truck's interior, where she had been collecting samples from the seat fabrics and floor mats. Soil samples from the floorboards contain microscopic glass particles that match the composition of the fragments we collected from the Rodriguez accident scene. This truck was definitely present at that collision. Meanwhile, Detective Mendez was conducting a thorough search of Wheeler's house, looking for additional evidence that might support their case. In Wheeler's bedroom closet, he discovered a pair of work boots with suspicious stains on the leather, and in the kitchen trash can, he found receipts from Murphy's Tavern, dated February 14th, the night of the hit and run. "Santos, look at this," Mendez called out, holding up the receipts. Wheeler was at Murphy's from 5:30 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. on February 14th. The Rodriguez collision occurred at 7:53 p.m. The timeline fits perfectly with Emma's description of an intoxicated driver. The evidence was mounting systematically, creating an overwhelming case against Wheeler. But perhaps the most damning discovery came from Detective Kim's examination of Wheeler's financial records. 3 days after the hit and run, Wheeler had paid $2,847 in cash to Precision Auto Body for extensive front-end repairs to his truck. He paid in cash, Kim reported during a briefing at the police station. No insurance claim, no financing, just a large cash payment for emergency bodywork. The timing is incredibly suspicious. Santos contacted Precision Auto Body and spoke directly with the manager, Tony Castellanos, who remembered Wheeler's job specifically because of the unusual circumstances. Guy came in early Saturday morning, said he hit a deer on the highway. Castellanos explained over the phone. But between you and me, detective, the damage pattern didn't look like any deer strike I've ever seen. More like he hit something at sidewalk level. The mechanic's professional assessment provided additional expert testimony to support their case. Castellanos agreed to testify that Wheeler's damage pattern was inconsistent with his claimed deer strike and much more consistent with a pedestrian collision. As the day progressed, Wheeler's carefully constructed alibi began falling apart under scrutiny. He had initially claimed to be home all evening on February 14th, watching television and drinking beer. But security footage from Murphy's Tavern clearly showed him consuming multiple alcoholic beverages throughout the evening, and his own credit card records contradicted his timeline. Public defender Amanda Richardson arrived at the police station at 2:30 p.m. to represent Wheeler during his interrogation. Richardson was an experienced attorney who specialized in DUI cases, and she immediately recognized the strength of the evidence being assembled against her client. "Marcus, they have you cold," Richardson explained during their private consultation. "Physical evidence, witness testimony, timeline documentation, financial records. This isn't a case you can win at trial. We need to discuss plea negotiations." But Wheeler remained in complete denial, insisting that the police had made a mistake and that he had never been involved in any accident. His refusal to acknowledge reality was frustrating Richardson, who knew that cooperation with prosecutors could result in a significantly reduced sentence. "I don't remember hitting anyone," Wheeler insisted, his hands shaking as he spoke. "I mean, I was drinking that night, but I always make it home safe. I'm a careful drunk driver." Richardson closed her eyes at Wheeler's inadvertent confession. His statement not only admitted to driving under the influence on the night in question, but also suggested a pattern of drunk driving behavior that would make him extremely unsympathetic to any jury. Back at Wheeler's house, forensic specialists were making additional discoveries that would prove crucial to the prosecution's case. Crime scene technician Robert Chun found glass fragments in Titan's fur that matched the broken headlight from the Rodriguez collision scene. The dog had apparently been cut by flying glass during the impact, providing direct physical evidence linking the animal to the crime scene. This German Shepherd was definitely in that truck when it struck Sofia Rodriguez, Chun reported to Santos. Glass fragments, stress indicators in his behavior, and physical evidence all support the child's testimony. Emma Rodriguez accurately identified not just the vehicle, but the specific dog that was present during her mother's hit and run. As evening approached, Santos felt the satisfaction that comes with solving a case that had haunted her for months. Emma's courage in speaking about her traumatic memories had provided the investigative breakthrough they needed, but it was the meticulous collection of physical evidence that would ensure Wheeler's conviction. Wheeler spent his first night in jail, curled up in his cell, finally beginning to comprehend the magnitude of what he had done and the consequences he was about to face. His decision to flee the scene, rather than helping Sofia Rodriguez, had transformed a tragic accident into a serious felony that would likely result in decades in prison. The 3-year-old witness, whose testimony had seemed too fragile to build a case upon, had proven to be the key to unlocking one of the most solid criminal prosecutions in Riverside County's recent history. The trial of Marcus Wheeler began on a crisp Monday morning in October, nearly 8 months after the hit and run that had devastated the Rodriguez family. Judge Patricia Williams presided over Courtroom 4A, which had been specially modified to accommodate what legal experts were calling the most unusual witness arrangement in California judicial history. Media attention had been intense ever since news broke that a 3-year-old would be testifying with the assistance of a police dog, an unprecedented situation that had drawn observers from across the country. Emma Rodriguez, now 4 years old and significantly more articulate than she had been during those traumatic months of silence, sat in the witness waiting room with her grandmother Maria. She wore a navy blue dress that her mother, Sophia, had carefully selected for this important day. Sophia, who had made a remarkable recovery from her injuries, but still walked with a slight limp, squeezed Emma's small hand reassuringly. "Remember what Dr. Chon taught you, Mia?" Sophia whispered to her daughter in Spanish. "Just tell the truth about what you saw. Rex will be right there with you." The courtroom was packed beyond capacity with journalists, legal observers, child advocacy groups, and community members who had followed the case since Emma's breakthrough testimony months earlier. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh had spent weeks preparing for this moment, knowing that the success of their prosecution would largely depend on how effectively Emma could communicate her memories to the jury. Defense attorney Amanda Richardson faced an almost impossible task. The physical evidence against Wheeler was overwhelming. DNA, paint transfers, glass fragments, timeline documentation, and financial records all supported the prosecution's case. Her only hope was to challenge Emma's credibility as a witness, arguing that a child's memory from such a traumatic event couldn't be considered reliable. "Your Honor," Richardson had argued during pretrial motions, asking a jury to convict, based primarily on the testimony of a toddler who was severely traumatized, sets a dangerous precedent. Children of that age are highly susceptible to suggestion and cannot be expected to accurately recall complex events. But Judge Williams had ruled that Emma's testimony would be allowed, provided that proper safeguards were in place to protect the child's well-being. The arrangement with Rex had been approved after extensive testimony from Dr. Chun about the dog's therapeutic role in helping Emma access and articulate her memories. Wheeler sat at the defendant's table wearing an orange county jail jumpsuit, his appearance dramatically changed from the man who had been arrested 6 months earlier. Weight loss, stress, and the reality of facing decades in prison had aged him considerably. His hands continued to shake, a side effect of forced sobriety that served as a constant reminder of the alcohol addiction that had led to this moment. As the trial entered its third day, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. The prosecution calls Emma Rodriguez to the witness stand, Da Walsh announced, her voice carrying across the hushed courtroom. The specially constructed witness area included a small chair positioned next to where Rex would sit, allowing Emma to maintain physical contact with the German Shepherd throughout her testimony. Officer Thompson led Rex into the courtroom, and the dog immediately took his designated position with the calm professionalism that had made him legendary within the police department. Emma walked to the witness stand with remarkable composure for a 4-year-old, her small hand trailing along Rex's fur as she passed him. The bailiff had prepared a special children's oath that Emma could understand and affirm, and she spoke clearly into the microphone that had been lowered to her eye level. "I promise to tell the truth about what I saw," Emma said, her voice carrying perfectly throughout the silent courtroom. D.A. Walsh approached the witness stand with gentle, measured steps. "Emma, can you tell us what happened on the night when your mommy got hurt?" Emma's response was immediate and detailed, her months of therapy with Dr. Chon having prepared her to articulate memories that had once been trapped by trauma. "Mommy and I were walking to the store to buy ice cream. We were crossing the street when the bad doggy car came really fast." "Emma, can you describe the bad doggy car?" Walsh asked, keeping her voice soft and encouraging. "It was red like my favorite crayon," Emma replied, unconsciously reaching toward Rex for comfort. "Big car with a doggy, hanging his head out the window. The doggy was brown and black like Rex, but bigger. He was barking because he was scared too." The specificity of Emma's description sent murmurs through the courtroom gallery. Despite her age, she was providing detailed observations that corroborated the physical evidence against Wheeler. "Emma, do you remember anything else about that night?" Walsh continued. The man driving smelled funny like Daddy's bottles, Emma said, her voice becoming slightly quieter. The car was going wobbly, not straight like cars should go. And then, ... She paused, looking at Rex for reassurance. The car hit my mommy and made her fly away from me. Walsh could feel the emotional impact of Emma's words on the jury. Several jurors were visibly moved, and one woman in the back row was quietly wiping away tears. "Emma, I want to show you something," Walsh said, producing a large photograph of Wheeler's red pickup truck. "Have you ever seen this car before?" Emma studied the photograph carefully, her small finger tracing the outline of the vehicle. "That's the bad doggy car," she said with absolute certainty. Same color, same shape, same windows where the doggy was. The moment that would define the trial came next. "Your Honor," Walsh announced, "we would like to bring the defendant's dog into the courtroom for identification purposes." Richardson immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial and irregular. There's no precedent for using an animal in this manner during testimony." But Judge Williams overruled the objection. The court recognizes the unique circumstances of this case. The identification will be allowed with proper safeguards in place. 2 animal control officers lead Titan into the courtroom, the massive German Shepherd immediately drawing everyone's attention. Despite being well behaved, Titan was noticeably larger and more intimidating than Rex, his presence filling the space with an energy that seemed to change the entire atmosphere of the room. The reaction was immediate and devastating for the defense. Emma's eyes widened as she saw Titan, and she pointed directly at the dog with the same certainty she had shown months earlier in the courthouse hallway. "That's the bad doggy," Emma exclaimed, her voice carrying clearly throughout the silent courtroom. "That's the doggy that was in the car that hurt my mommy." The identification was so immediate and definitive that even Richardson appeared shaken. Emma showed no hesitation, no uncertainty. She recognized Titan with the absolute conviction of someone who had never forgotten that traumatic night. Wheeler's reaction was equally telling. As Emma pointed at his dog, Wheeler buried his face in his hands and began crying quietly at the defendant's table. His body language conveyed the guilt and remorse that his words had never expressed. "Emma," Walsh continued gently, "are you sure that's the same doggy you saw in the car?" "Yes," Emma replied firmly, still looking at Titan. "He's the same doggy. But he looks sad now. I think he knows what happened was bad, too." Emma's empathy toward Titan, her ability to recognize that the dog had also been a victim of Wheeler's choices, demonstrated remarkable emotional intelligence that impressed everyone present. Even some of Wheeler's family members in the gallery appeared moved by the child's compassion. During cross-examination, Richardson attempted to challenge Emma's memory and perception, but the 4-year-old remained consistent and confident in her testimony. When Richardson suggested that Emma might be confusing different dogs, Emma shook her head firmly. "No, that's the right doggy," Emma insisted. "I remember because he was scared like me. His ears were back, and he was making scared sounds, not happy barks." Dr. Chun, who had been observing from the gallery, later testified about the reliability of traumatic memories in young children, explaining that significant emotional events often create exceptionally clear and permanent memories, even in very young witnesses. As Emma's testimony concluded, the entire courtroom seemed to recognize that they had witnessed something extraordinary. A brave 4-year-old had not only found her voice after months of trauma-induced silence, but had provided testimony that would ensure justice for her family and prevent Wheeler from ever again putting innocent people at risk. The defense's case collapsed completely in the face of Emma's identification and the overwhelming physical evidence. Wheeler's fate was sealed by the courage of the smallest witness in the courtroom, a little girl who had refused to let trauma silence the truth forever. The jury deliberated for only 2 hours and 37 minutes, a remarkably short time for a felony case of this magnitude. When the bailiff announced that a verdict had been reached, courtroom 4A filled quickly with the same crowd of reporters, legal observers, and community members who had followed the case since Emma's extraordinary testimony began making national headlines 3 days earlier. The speed of the deliberation suggested a unanimous decision, and experienced court watchers knew that could mean only one thing. Emma sat in the front row of the gallery between her mother Sophia and grandmother Maria, both women holding her small hands as they awaited the verdict that would finally bring closure to their 8-month nightmare. Sophia had insisted on being present despite her ongoing physical therapy for the injuries she had sustained in the hit and run. She needed to see justice served not just for herself, but for her brave daughter, who had found the courage to speak truth to power. Marcus Wheeler appeared to have aged another decade since his arrest. The Orange County jail jumpsuit hung loosely on his diminished frame, and his hands trembled continuously, a combination of alcohol withdrawal symptoms and the crushing weight of knowing that his life was about to change forever. His court-appointed attorney, Amanda Richardson, sat beside him with the resigned expression of someone who had fought valiantly but knew the outcome was inevitable. Judge Patricia Williams entered the courtroom with the formal dignity that had characterized her 23 years on the bench. She had presided over countless criminal trials, but the case of People v. Marcus Wheeler would be remembered as one of the most significant of her career, not just for its legal precedent involving child witnesses, but for the remarkable courage displayed by a 4-year-old girl who had refused to let trauma silence her voice. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Williams asked, her voice carrying clearly throughout the packed courtroom. Jury foreman Robert Martinez, a 54-year-old engineer who had been visibly moved by Emma's testimony, stood and faced the judge. "We have, Your Honor." The silence in the courtroom was absolute as Martinez unfolded the verdict form. Emma leaned closer to her mother, instinctively sensing the importance of this moment, even though she didn't fully understand the legal proceedings surrounding her. "On the charge of vehicular manslaughter while under the influence, we find the defendant Marcus Wheeler guilty," Martinez announced, his voice steady and clear. "On the charge of hit and run resulting in great bodily injury, we find the defendant Marcus Wheeler guilty. On the charge of driving under the influence causing injury, we find the defendant Marcus Wheeler guilty." The courtroom erupted in a mixture of relief, vindication, and celebration. Sofia Rodriguez began crying tears that represented months of accumulated pain, fear, and hope, finally reaching resolution. Maria crossed herself and whispered a prayer of thanksgiving in Spanish, while Emma looked around with wide eyes, beginning to understand that something very important had just happened. Wheeler's reaction was immediate and complete emotional collapse. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed openly at the defendant's table, finally expressing the remorse and acknowledgement of responsibility that had been absent throughout the entire legal proceedings. His crying was so intense that Richardson had to place a steadying hand on his shoulder to keep him from falling out of his chair. Judge Williams restored order with her gavel and immediately moved to the sentencing phase. California law provided specific guidelines for the charges Wheeler had been convicted of, but the judge also had discretionary authority to consider aggravating and mitigating factors when determining the final sentence. "Mr. Wheeler," Judge Williams addressed the defendant directly, "you have been found guilty of serious felony charges that resulted from a series of choices you made on the evening of February 14th. Your decision to drink and drive, your decision to flee the scene rather than render aid, and your decision to conceal your crime for months afterward demonstrate a pattern of behavior that this court finds deeply troubling." District Attorney Jennifer Walsh stood to address the court during the sentencing hearing. "Your Honor, the defendant's actions didn't just injure Sofia Rodriguez, They traumatized her 4-year-old daughter in ways that will affect this family for years to come. Emma Rodriguez spent 6 months unable to speak about what she witnessed because the defendant's choices created trauma that silenced a child's voice. The fact that she found the courage to testify is a testament to her remarkable strength, not an indication that Mr. Wheeler's crimes were any less serious. Wheeler's attorney made a final plea for leniency, arguing that her client's alcoholism was a disease that required treatment rather than purely punitive measures. Your Honor, Mr. Wheeler is deeply remorseful for his actions and ready to accept responsibility for the harm he has caused. He has been sober for 8 months while in custody and is committed to maintaining his sobriety and making amends to the Rodriguez family. But Judge Williams was unmoved by the defense's arguments. She had spent considerable time reviewing Wheeler's criminal history, which included 2 previous DUI convictions and a pattern of alcohol-related incidents that demonstrated his unwillingness to address his addiction before it destroyed innocent lives. Mr. Wheeler, you have had multiple opportunities to address your alcohol abuse before it resulted in devastating consequences for others, Judge Williams stated firmly. Your previous DUI convictions should have served as clear warnings that your drinking and driving behavior was escalating toward tragedy. Instead, you ignored those warnings and continued making choices that put innocent people at risk. The sentence was severe but appropriate under California law, 15 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 12 years. Wheeler would also be required to pay full restitution to the Rodriguez family for Sophia's medical expenses, Emma's ongoing therapy costs, and other damages related to the incident. As Wheeler was led away in handcuffs, he turned toward the Rodriguez family and spoke his first words of genuine remorse. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible over the courtroom noise. "I'm so sorry for what I did to your family." Sophia Rodriguez stood as Wheeler passed her row, and for a moment, the two made direct eye contact. "I forgive you, Sophia," said quietly, her words carrying a grace that surprised everyone who heard them. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. Following Wheeler's sentencing, the Rodriguez family held a brief press conference on the courthouse steps. Emma, now comfortable around cameras and reporters after months of media attention, spoke with the clarity and poise that had made her testimony so compelling. "I'm glad the bad doggy's owner has to think about what he did," Emma said, her small voice carrying over the crowd of reporters. "Maybe now he'll learn that drinking and driving hurts families. Rex and Officer Thompson helped me be brave enough to tell the truth, and I'm proud that I could help my mommy get justice." The case immediately became a landmark proceeding for courts across the country dealing with child witnesses in criminal proceedings. Legal experts began studying the therapeutic use of service animals in helping traumatized children access and communicate difficult memories, leading to new protocols and procedures that would benefit countless other young victims. Officer Thompson and Rex continued their regular visits to the Rodriguez family, their bond having evolved from professional necessity to genuine friendship. Emma's recovery progressed remarkably, and she began speaking publicly at child advocacy events, encouraging other young victims to find their voices and seek justice. 6 months after Wheeler's conviction, Emma received a special recognition award from the California State Attorney General's office for her courage in testifying. At the ceremony, she stood confidently at the podium with Rex beside her and delivered a brief speech that brought the entire audience to tears. "Sometimes scary things happen, but we don't have to stay scared forever," Emma said, her hand resting on Rex's head. "When we tell the truth about what we saw, we can help make sure other people stay safe. I want other kids to know that even if you're little, your voice is important, and grown-ups will listen when you're brave enough to speak." The Rodriguez family's nightmare had finally ended, but Emma's courage had created something beautiful and lasting, a legacy of hope, healing, and the unshakable truth that justice can emerge from even the darkest circumstances when brave hearts refuse to remain silent.